Very happy to welcome Sinead and Ian. They're going to talk to us this morning about placemaking, making places, and a structured toolkit-based approach to creating place, not just space, I believe. Anyway, I hand over to you, and let's go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, good morning, everybody. We're very pleased to be here. And we are here to talk exactly about that. It's place, not space. This bit is all about me having a dream. It's the what if. I'm stealing there from Dr. Martin Luther King, sorry. But what if we had workplaces that were truly collaborative? And by workplaces, I don't just mean offices or office environments, but because it's a university, I mean all the spaces on campus. So formal and informal learning spaces, social spaces, academic office space, professional service office space. And my role as Future Spaces Manager at Sheffield Hallam is all about making sure that those spaces are fit for purpose for now and for the future, but also that they're the places that people actually need. So staff and students, that they are the places that people need. So my dream was, what if we actually could create or co-create with staff and students some great, great places around the campus. And then I woke up. Because, and other speakers have touched upon it this morning. I'm sure, lots of people in the room will recognize it. Geez, it's difficult. You've got various people who are stuck in their ways, who don't want to move. What about my books? And other people who, just for various reasons, they do very different things. So you're trying to apply one size fits all. It's not going to work. It's a bit like the King's example of putting people into open plan, and the academics probably revolted. But yeah, so you've got this myriad of challenges then when you're thinking about space, which is why we decided not to really. So we were thinking at Hallam, well, why do our projects fail? Now, when I say fail, I don't actually mean fail, because we've built some great buildings, we've been nominated for awards, etc., etc. But actually we were finding then, I used to do quite a lot of post-occupancy evaluation, we were finding the feedback just wasn't great. People weren't particularly happy. So we decided to look into why that was. And, you'll recognize these again. Unclear objectives, people not knowing what it is that they actually want. And if you start a project on that premise, it is going to fail. Inappropriate, inadequate project teams, and again, that's not their fault. If you look at the skill set of a lot of the teams that are delivering projects, very good maybe construction project managers, but are they good at change? No, or not necessarily. Planning and controls can be poor, but then another key one was a lack of stakeholder communication and consultation, and Holly and Niamh touched on this being really important, because it's that consultation that is key to making a project successful. But I'd go back even a stage further and say that it has to be the right consultation about the right things with the right people at the right time. Now, I have to admit, I saw this slide last night and I cursed Ian, because he's introduced a word in German, I don't know how to pronounce it, so...
Verschlimmbessern, I believe.
Thank you. So it's basically, the kind of well-intended, but the consequences, you're actually making things worse, even though you're trying to actually improve, you're trying to make things better, but yeah, you're on that slippery slope, you're onto a loser from the start. The stakes are really high, because as we all know, it's expensive to do projects. Space is very expensive. It's at a premium. Universities in particular are under a huge amount of pressure to make sure that everything we spend is justified and basically delivers good value for money, particularly in the environment now where we've got students paying higher and higher amounts of fees, and they demand and expect better things. And we've got staff then as well, whether they're in professional services, in a support or enabling role, or whether they're academic staff, that basically they can vote with their feet. They can go and work somewhere else if they're not actually happy with the conditions that they're in. So this is kind of a case study. Hallam engaged with 3 Edges
Yeah.
which was about, September last year?
A bit earlier than that, I think, over the summer.
Yeah, okay, summer. To basically work with us on a collaborative project which would look at some of these challenges and how we might start to address them. And even as we were starting this, we could hear the kind of creak of a door opening, because at the same time in Hallam, with new VC, new university strategy, and if you just have a look at some of these things, this is just one of our university strategy pillars, building a great university, and that's both literal and figurative. Outstanding environment, radical about the way we work, exciting workplace, shared expertise, attract and retain the best people, and make it all sustainable. So there's already a will within the university to change how we do things, and that's reflected in the facilities directorate and in the estates team, which is where I work. Over to you.
Good morning, everybody. So this is where kind of we can pick up the story from a Three Edges perspective. And Three Edges, we kind of like the home team for Sheffield Hallam. James has worked there in the past. I worked there in the past. It was lovely when Sue mentioned, I think one of the very opening comments of the conference was talking about some of the great work that came out of the Facilities Management Graduate Centre at Sheffield Hallam, thinking about how students perceive spaces and how they value spaces. Because essentially I used to work in the same area that people like Professor Ilfrin Price were working out of when they were doing some of that thinking. So, you know, it's fascinating that Sinead talked about the crack of a door opening, because in the past, we've been knee-deep in this with the business school and with Hallam, trying to really sort it kind of from the inside out. You know, back in 2009, back in 2010, we were trying to encourage them to think about what their future could be as an institution and how that might translate into a sense of place, not just a sense of space, without getting obsessed with space. And we also, you know, we were starting to play with kind of very participatory, engaging tools where we were kind of trying to take the needs and the wants and play them off against what might be available and really encourage engagement to talk about that. So there's kind of this real kind of home team kind of ethos when we came together to start working. And so when James and I came to the table, this is Sinead, and this is kind of what she's after. You know, she's like, I don't know what it is, but I want this thing, and I need this thing to be able to do this. I need this repeatable, scalable process. I deal with parts of departments that need to sort out a new area, and I got to build new buildings for whole faculties as well. So I need this bit, and I got to make sure that this learning is transferable. I can't accept any longer that we're going to have a project done here with these people and we make these mistakes, and then we're going to go over here and we're going to do the same ones again because it's switched off, it's disconnected. And you know this stuff, right? Because it's part of the folklore of how all this happens. Meanwhile, Sinead's boss is kind of, well, he wants something quite different. I want this kind of like Lego kit of space archetypes that I can work out. I might use different bricks for different solutions, but I need those bricks. I need to know what they are, because then I can turn it into a process. So they talk in sensible sentences, whereas Three Edges talks in bizarre equations and riddles. But this is an opportunity for me to sort of tell you a little bit about our starting point. And our starting point is kind of rooted in this wonderful book called Spatial Agency, which I'm sure some of you are aware of, written from the University of Sheffield and Jeremy Till. And it's this notion of creating expert citizens, or using expert citizenship, if you like, as experts in this field to unlock the other expertise that you need to really create great buildings and great workplaces, and you know, some of the softer skills that you need to do this. And we're probably starting to bleed into change management here as well. You know, notions of translation and storytelling to really get that emotional engagement. And you know, switching off that hubristic element of our industry, which says I've got a great vision for this building, and saying, well, let's come inside the building, let's forget about the form, and let's actually think about what it's doing for the people and how they're going to thrive within it. So a little bit of shorthand, space, you know, the way we see it, you know, space had culture, that's where place comes alive. And because these days it's all very distributed and there's technology everywhere and we can have space virtually as well as physically, then it needs to involve enabling technology as well. So in a nutshell, this project became all about, placemaking is a term that's been around, I think, since the 50s. That's about right, isn't it? And that we see as synonymous with enabling communities. And that's very different to managing facilities. That's a very different starting point if that's where you're going to think about it. Now, it's worth stopping, pressing pause at this point and going, this is not a new challenge. Gentleman in the audience, getting a free plug for his book at this point, but part of what Neil's writing this year, what's published, is trying to help people think more progressively about that and give them the tools to do it. And essentially get some of this know-how out of the black box, the industry black box that it lives in. And you can all fling your tomatoes at me now, and you can fling glass bottles and whatnot, but we've been doing this for a long time, and there's a lot of the same problems getting repeated. So is there a way to get past that, a kind of an aspirational challenge? So the shape of the commission is very much about genuine partnership. It's very much about trust and commitment. When we came to the table and agreed to work together, we didn't actually know what the solution was going to be, but we wanted it to be essentially, a true gestalt, not more than the sum of the parts, but different because of the sum of the parts. And, very, very simply, 3 phases. Let's take stock of what we've got at Hallam. Let's look at the successes and let's look at some of the failures. Let's dig underneath and find some of the real challenges. And let's then think about very creatively what's that solution. And if we've got a solution, and at this point we didn't know it was going to be a toolkit, but if we've got a solution, then let's try it, let's test it, let's learn from it, and let's refine it. So a real sort of creative design process.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the Hallam's campus master plan was being developed. So yeah, nice, sexy visual. But basically, it was a great opportunity for us to kind of say, okay, well, we've actually got something here that we can use on this. So rather than just doing shiny new building syndrome, we'll actually start with that sense of placemaking that Ian's just been talking about. And it is all of these things. It's how they knit together all of these dependencies. So the workplace planning, the master planning, all of the strategic stuff from the previous slide as well, and just asking the right questions about that. One of the first things we did was we had a look at taking stock. So we had a series of interviews with loads of people from around the university, both people who've been involved in the project work, so implementing the project, and those who were on the receiving end, so right across the university. Everybody was really, really willing to talk to us, and I think one of the reasons was that they're never usually asked. And these are some of the things that they were saying to us, that basically there's limited scope for engagement. You do have to have time for it built in. The inter-project learning, as Ian said earlier, was switched off. Really inconsistent engagement and communication on projects as well, and people really feeling done to. We've got a couple of quotes up there, but there was another, somebody else said something like, we want you to help us see what is the art of the possible here. Don't just point to the path, walk along it with us. So there was a real sense of we need help. So in thinking about that, we started to look at, okay, so we've got this idea about early engagement being really important and consultation being really important, but there's got to be a framework to pin it onto, because our project managers are using this. So the RIBA plan of works, basically, we had a look at this and then we thought, well, actually, we're probably very good at doing this humpy bit in the middle, the construction, the techie stuff and all of that, but it's the bits at the end that actually we're missing. So we thought, well, actually, if we start to pay more attention to that, it starts to look like this, and you start to bring in the early engagement and the construction project management and the workplace change and the ongoing engagement. So just bringing people right the way through that journey with us. It's that hand-holding, it's the showing us the path and walking it with us piece. But then we got to thinking, well, actually, that starts at stage 0. Strategic definition, talks about the business case, it talks about the strategic brief. How do people know what they want, though? And that goes back to that thing of, we don't know what's possible, we only know what we know. Help us with that. So we came up with a cheeky -1, basically, and that's all about visioning. It's basically, it's sitting down with people and saying, what is it that you want to achieve? What are your strategic aims in your faculty, in your school, in your department? or whatever. And basically then who else do we need to talk about or talk to? And also, again, going back to the university strategy, is that aligned? Because if it isn't, it's going to get kicked out or it's just not going to work. So all of these things, again, just started to come together nicely for us.
I think that's me.
That's you.
So, we can do a kind of a bit of pop management on this, and I'm sure probably most of you in the audience have seen the Simon Sinek Start with Why and heard of the the Apple story about the iPods and whatnot. But basically, this is this in action. It's if we start aspirationally with why and we create a space to have structured conversations about that, then we can start talking more qualitatively, more valuably about the how. Get to stronger strategic definitions, which then start to get us into the quantitative what. And, very simple words, very simple idea. But, sometimes some of the best ideas are you kind of look at it and go, oh, I knew that all along, but now I can kind of see it. And is that the slide that says, yes, now, I'm not into football, but I believe that's a free kick. Is that correct? So, and the point of this isn't that there are too many players on the field. It's that, John Kay from the Financial Times, another concept, we've talked about Verschlimmbessern. Here's a different one, obliquity. This notion that the best way to get to something most successfully is sometimes to do it indirectly. Okay, so the what is all about the space, but it is at arm's length over there until the time is right. But because if it gets into the conversation earlier, it makes the conversation essentially become toxic. It means you get into conversations about academics and open plan, whereas we should be having discussions about what's this all in service of. So kind of that kind of idea. And just to kind of nail that, and second plug for Mr. Usher in the audience. Seriously, I did not know you were going to be here today, mate, so I'm sorry about that. But, it's that let's focus on what we're supposed to be doing at the right time. And if we are too far into the space too soon, stop, go back, think about what it's all about. So I'm going to hand back to Sinead now.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things we looked at was okay, so if we're going to be running workshops and talking about visioning and talking about strategy, that's probably going to be at a kind of a level in a faculty or department. But actually, it's really important to kind of sense check that with all of the rest of the people who are going to be using that building or space or whatever. So the M is broadly the kind of, the workshops are run, but then we go out to a wider group of stakeholders, and it's basically getting their feedback. Because if they're, if they say the faculty leadership team are saying X, and everybody else in the faculty is saying Y, there's a problem. And that's when you get into your change management, and you need to kind of change the hearts and minds to bring people along that journey, or question what has been kind of agreed in the visioning part. And that goes all the way through the stages of the toolkit, continually going out and back. But one of the important things for Hallam was that this is scalable. So equally, this can be used on a set of new buildings as part of the campus master plan, but also a smaller refurb. And that's really important for us to be able to do that, because we can't just kind of throw everything at the shiny new buildings and then ignore any refurbishments that are going on and the people that are going through that. It's equally important. But the scalable bit means that although you might do, I don't know, whatever amount of exercises in stage -1, and you might do whatever amount of consultation in stage 0, that can be scaled back or expanded, and we've various methods to do that stakeholder consultation, and a variety of things ranging from online tools to just getting people into a room with some flip chart paper and post-it notes. It can be as complicated or as simple as you need it to be, basically. So this is what we actually came up with. So it's our workplace engagement toolkit. Version 1 came out October. I'm currently using this. And basically in the pack, there's the explanation of the approach, some user guidance, the resources and the exercises, and then the instructions on how to use them as well. Shout out for Jackie from Design North who did these fantastic drawings for us. So this is just an example of some of the activities cards that are part of the Resources Toolkit. And it's basically to draw out people thinking about the activities that they might be doing, the activities that students might be doing during any kind of given day. And then, again, Jackie's work, looking at space archetypes, because essentially, when you start to think about learning spaces or office spaces, there's not actually that many types, really. You know, there's varieties or there's variations on a theme, but actually if you start with something like these and say to people, okay, based on what we know, what's the best fit for you, or do we need to tweak that bit, then you're starting to get into a more sensible conversation about space than just looking at a kind of floor plan and blobs of furniture on. Whoops. So, as I said, we are using it in Hallam at the moment. Although I am an army of one, so I'm busy. But basically we're using it for the new Sheffield Business School and for a new home, couple of buildings for those departments. And I've basically been running workshops with key stakeholders and also going out to the kind of wider stakeholders groups through a variety of methods. The feedback, and I know you think she would say this, but the feedback has been hugely positive. You know, the PVC deans of faculties have actually just said how refreshing it is to have an approach that actually involves people early enough to have an impact on the design decisions, and that the consultation and engagement part involves a much wider group of people, and that's so important for their staff and for their students, so they really feel part of the project from the outset. And tweaks along the way, because we are learning. So already, having gotten feedback from some of the exercises, there's been kind of slight changes to some wording and stuff like that. And that's really important to us as well. The learning has to be embedded in everything that we do, because otherwise we're going to stay still. So just a couple of visuals. These are some of the workshops that I've been running. I know people pointing at pictures. It's like an internet meme or something, but they are actually real.
It's worth, I'm going to have to interrupt just at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen that slide in the middle, Neil, but one of the tools that we created, its working title is Neil's Diamond.
Yes.
And it's a version of Diamond ranking using the 6 reasons why you might want to create a fantastic workplace, and getting people to really discuss, well, what's at the top of that pack and what would be at the bottom of it if we had to force our choices and stuff like that. So I hope we get to keep the name, because it's pretty good. So just to sort of wrap up, because we're really, really tight on time, this is the busiest slide of all, but whilst we were thinking about this and putting this presentation together, we discovered that the RCA, Jeremy Myerson Helen Hamlin Centre, and Gensler had been working on their own study, which was, the topic was about well-being and how well-being is linked to functional and psychological workplace needs. But what they were really testing was, to what extent does a participatory process enhance that? And proper and really nice design, when Jeremy is involved, they tend to sort of end up being sort of award-winning studies in the field. And this is a nice little methodology which says we've got control groups, we've got no consultation, and we've got high consultation and partial consultation. And I thought one of the key findings, apart from the fact that giving voice to employees creates a sense of control essential to personal well-being, is this thing that people expressed satisfaction with staffed design workplaces, even if they weren't involved themselves. So something about feeling like people have got your back who understand it from your perspective. My words rather than the study's words. But this notion that the process is as valuable, if not more valuable in some circumstances, than the actual outcome and the product. So Sinead was singing the praises, so is her boss, Dan, at the moment. And I won't sort of dwell on this, but what we've seen is actually this methodology, people in the faculties have started to go, we've got consultation stuff, this is transferable, it's not about workspace and workplace, or it's a different facet of workplace, it's more cultural. Can we use these ideas and can we use this toolkit? So that's really valuable. So where next? Well, we've twigged that this has got value way beyond Hallam, okay? This thing is scalable and repeatable outwith of the organisation. We've got this notion that enabling expert clients comes from a learning community, and that actually, in the same way that REBA, the plan of works, can create a common language outside of construction, We can also use it to create a kind of a common language and really democratize this process. Which is the sort of thing that academics, I am one, and I am quite follically challenged, probably more follically challenged than most in this audience, but I'm kind of both, and I've got feet in both camps, and I find this really quite exciting, and make sure that this learning stays on. So, we have the potential right now to get some innovation funding for this. That potential requires evidence of a learning community that are interested in doing something with this, and want to get involved in a sort of testing and a prototype type way. So the question is, how can I learn more? How can I get involved? So we would love you to go to engage-kit.com and register your interest. The site is up. It's a really simple site at this point, and it just gives you an opportunity to go, please tell me more when the time is right. And then we can start evidencing that people are genuinely interested in this. So have I left this slide up long enough for you to memorize that web address? We've also got an article in Work and Place, Mark Eltringham's really nice publication, which is getting a complete revamp and should be out in the next couple of weeks. If you want to chuck us your business card, we'll make sure you get a copy of that. Subscribe to our newsletter at 3 Edges, and on a monthly basis, we'll keep you posted. And find us for a chat. And I would also, I keep looking down at the front. James is with me today, my partner in crime at 3 Edges. So don't just talk to Sinead and I, but come and quiz James about this as well, because I'm the chatty one, and he's the mastermind. So thank you very much indeed for listening. I hope you've got some questions.
Sinead and Ian, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I was feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the complexity we saw from Sue earlier today, and was hoping that we'd actually find some tools and ways of dissecting it, and hopefully this is going to be one of the tools that actually helps us. We're running a little bit over, but I do think we want to allow time for questions, so we might just run just slightly into lunch. Does anyone have a question? The gentleman in the middle.
How does innovation? How do you think there could be a problem with innovation in this? Because if you're saying, I get what you're trying to. I get you're not trying to design the space. You're trying to say, what are we doing here to table the conversation? But do you think there could be a concern around innovation, because it could kind of lock the conversation into a set of fixed assets that you're discussing?
So for me, this is really about that notion of expert citizenship. There's an academic who's an Australian academic called Jameson who's really interested in this, and he paints a picture of around that table you've all got different expertise. What you don't want is the academics telling you how to do space and the architects telling you how to teach. What you've got to do at that table is use that expert citizenship approach, and that's the real spatial agency key, to tease out the right bits to get that, essentially, that gestalt. So yeah, you've got to watch for that, absolutely. And you might want to push people and nudge people, but it's a different tone of conversation.
Thank you.
Back on time,
well then,
Paul.
thank you very much. I think we got back on time.